Hello and welcome to the Irish NFL Show. My name is Shane Brennan and thank you very much for joining us. We're delighted to be switching our focus to college football as the national championship game takes place in Miami this coming week. So I'm delighted to have Andrew McGuinnes, who runs a page called An Irishman on football. He's based in Atlanta, which is right deep in SEC/ACC country, and I'm sure to light us up into what we can expect from what is going to be a great matchup this weekend between the Indiana Hoosiers and all about the University of Miami, who incidentally are playing in their home stadium. Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Shane. Delighted to be here. And, I think that this game, or chiefly Indiana, has kind of captured the United States right now. It's nice to have just a wonderful story to be able to kind of latch onto. And I think we're in for a serious game on Monday night.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching this one. Indiana has been such a great story. I mean, we'll talk about the fact that obviously Mendoza being somebody that we're all familiar with, but also just the nature of his relationship with his head coach. Like, his head coach seems to now is the ultimate sort of perfectionist, and Mendoza seems to be just so happy and flowery with everybody else. But we'll get on to that. I'm interested in your own personal story because, like I said at the top of the show, you're based in Atlanta. You run this page called An Irishman on football. But you were saying to me off air, this is very much, you kind of pivoted into doing a lot more college-based stuff rather than NFL. So talk to me about the work that you were doing and why college football has gripped your imagination.
Absolutely. I think how it started was it started as a sideline gig really during the pandemic. My wife and I just had our first child. We're in Seattle at the time. I'm a avid Packers fan, and so it started off really with a little bit of I wrote a piece after going to see, my son was born in October 2018. A couple of weeks later, the much maligned Mike McCarthy came to town with the Packers, and Packers lost, and that served to be like the final game for him. So I think I wrote my first piece on the back of that, speculating whether it be John Harbaugh, Matt LaFleur's name was in the mix. So from there, it kind of became something that then became probably a twice weekly during the pandemic post piece on top of family life and work and everything else. And then when we relocated to Atlanta, Georgia in 2021 because my wife's family, they're originally from Michigan, but they'd moved down here. So it was great to have, I guess, more family support with young family when we got here. So my interest had kind of started to move before that. So I kind of inherited my wife's team, Michigan, on Saturdays. As I said, I'm Packers fan on Sundays. So yeah, in the middle of SEC country here, it's just that is what fuels so many people. And so Georgia were an absolute powerhouse. They still are, obviously, but they won 2 national titles then. So it was really exciting to see that, and kind of the dominance of Alabama being broken slightly. And but yeah, as I said to you beforehand, it's kind of spilled out into broader, football. I did an interview with a Hillsborough survivor, covered the growth of U.S. rugby between speaking to Gavin Hickey, who's in charge of Navy's rugby program, and also just speaking to Leinster about their advances into the U.S. market as well. So much more beyond football. Don't let the title fool you. But no, I think if someone who grew up I grew up in a sports mad family. Grew up in rugby family and a gymnastics family on my mum's side. My dad coached Scaries during the 90s, and I got to see them kind of climb from the lower reaches of Division 5 all the way towards Division 2. And yeah, there's something of the fairy tale about one of the teams that we're going to talk about today. But I'd argue that there's also something longer lasting about their story as well, that they're here to, Cignetti is not here to win a national championship and take the Steelers job on Tuesday, I don't think.
Yeah.
But it's in the mix.
And it's an interesting thing because I think for all of us who are very much focused on an NFL thing, the only really time we hear about these college head coaches is an assumption they might make the jump. We're talking about Marcus Freeman during the Giants conversation. Is he going to leave Notre Dame? But then I know people you're in a part of the country where college football, I think, is still very much, if not number one, I guess, in parts of Georgia. Certainly you'll be able to attest to that more than I will. But in terms of the respect that people have for this, talk to us about the respect people have for Curt Cignetti. Curt Cignetti, head coach of Indiana. Like I was saying earlier, for most of this season, he's shown himself to be a character who's always striving for perfection. Doesn't matter if they're winning by 51-20, he's still trying to get that final notch on their performance. It's similar to what we saw from Nick Saban, for instance. You were mentioning the Alabama dominance of SEC football uh, in the pre NIL era. So, talk to us about Cignetti as to what kind of person he is, and just the cultural impact he has had on this Indiana team, who are playing for their first ever national title. I think it's only the fourth time since in the college playoff era where a team is playing for the first national title in their entire history. It's an incredible story.
Yeah, and as you say, Shane, he is an integral part of how maybe the sport has changed since NIL and the transfer portal came in, because he's so adept at going after people who are proven rather than 5-star talents. It's like he goes after 2-star people. He turned up at his first press conference with Indiana media about a year and a half ago and got some questions about, well, why are you here and what can you do? And he was very succinct and pithy. His words were, Google me, I win. And so I think there's a trajectory probably in the last 5 years, especially where you have coaches who are not from traditional Power 4 or Power 5 schools who are getting their opportunity to shine. He went to a bunch of schools that most people won't have heard of in the US, let alone internationally. Like, he was at Elon, he was at Indiana University, Pennsylvania as a head coaching stint. And then he was at JMU, James Madison, which really got him in the spotlight for the Indiana gig. And he's kind of no nonsense. I think he's very sincere. He worked under Saban, as did Mario Cristobal, who is going to be coaching against on Monday night, as a head of recruitment. And I think his ability to ID talent is remarkable, because he goes after people who perform maybe lower down the leagues or at a Power 2 level. Or sorry, not Power 2 level, at a kind of like almost 1-star, 2-star recruit level. But he sees not only does he see the potential, he sees this person can come in and make an impact for me today. He brought a bevy of guys from James Madison across, who, if you look at the backbone of the team, those guys, there's 13 of them still left. I think all but one of them will be gone by the end of, by Tuesday. They'll be probably, some of them will be going to the NFL, others will be going to start life in corporate America or whatever. But he has this ability to bring people with him. He is an elite identifier of talent, and performance for him is everything. That's why his 2 assistants have come from James Madison. They've also been with him before as well. So it's kind of remarkable, but he keeps the good people. He has good people around him. He keeps them there. And I think he knows how to dip into the transfer portal and really maximize who he brings in. He doesn't want guys who are necessarily going to disrupt his program. It's like, you absolutely have to go along. You alluded to the Fernando Mendoza piece there. Like, Mendoza, he's very on message in a lot of ways. And, he's very folksy and charming, which is a real, Midwestern Indiana trace, Hoosiers trace. So I think Cignetti, his time has come. And, I just think, I think it would be just an incredible story if they
Yeah.
But
just circle back to the 5-star point that you were making earlier. Sorry, it's just you were saying earlier about the fact that he doesn't have a lot of 5-star recruits. He's making the best out of the kind of guys he has. We look at the comparison. I mean, Indiana, for people who haven't been keeping track, they're 15-0 over the course of their season. They beat Alabama and Oregon by a combined score of 94-25. Despite the fact they've had no players who were 5-star recruits in their starting lineup, and only one guy who was considered a top 100 recruit. Compare that to 9 5-star recruits that Alabama had going in to this year's playoffs. Ohio State, who are the reigning champions, had 3, 5, and 16 4-star recruits. That's just the kind of talent gap that on paper he's working with. But just to what you were saying there, he has guys he trusts in terms of coaching. He has a system he trusts in terms of what he's implementing. And it's working, because the performances, not only in terms of quarterback, but offensive line, talent players, everything you're seeing has really been brought up to a very high level in Indiana, to a level which I imagine most Hoosier fans probably never thought that they'd see in their entire lives.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely fair. I had the privilege of being able to watch them in the college football semifinal last Friday night in Atlanta. And the thing that stands out within maybe after about 4 or 5 plays, And now the first play, D'Angelo Pons, who was from Miami, their cornerback, picked off Oregon's quarterback. But it's like they go the flow, the tempo, the level that they're executing at is they don't make mistakes. They don't give up city plays. This is a big challenge for Miami on Monday night. Will be, can they also, to stay in the game to when they get to the fourth quarter, can they also play mistake free all the way? Because that's definitely one maybe criticism of Miami, is that they go, they crush people at the line, and the running game gets going, and then they make 2 mistakes in a row like they did against Ole Miss, and they let them back into the game, like just killer penalties. Indiana won't do that. They're so well drilled under Cignetti, and I think they're probably accustomed to. I think when they get going, or if they're going to get a in the trenches really big fight, like they did against Indiana in the Big Ten game back in December. They've had 2 games where they've crushed Oregon and Alabama. I think it'll be much more like a low scoring, not necessarily 13-10, but I think Miami will definitely cut it up to them until we get into like the low reaches of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, let's we'll talk about Miami in a second. Let's stick with Indiana. Obviously, you saying you got the chance to see them in Georgia when they played in, I was going to say the Georgia Dome, but that's the old stadium, the Mercedes-Benz.
Georgia Dome. I think we've got the wrong century for the Georgia Dome.
Yeah, very much so. I'm still going back to was the Georgia Dome where they used to play a lot of SEC championship games back in the 90s? I'm probably watching too many old documentaries.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When Florida or the Pomp and probably Miami as well. Yeah, and all the southern schools and Florida State as well.
All those guys. But you were there, and it's amazing to see, obviously, to see a red. People of Indiana definitely showing up for that game. Mendoza, I think, is somebody we've heard about. Who else is on this Indiana team that I think is worth watching, not only in terms of draft, but just in terms of people who are tuning in? I think the game kicks off at midnight Irish time for those who are staying up or maybe coming back for the following day. Who are the stars? Who are the bedrocks to this success? Because quarterback and head coach are obviously the 2 of the faces on Mount Rushmore, but it's a team game and there's a lot of talent on this squad.
There is, and I think probably with Indiana, they've had a kind of a second-year player, sophomore, called Charlie Becker. The commentators like to say Charlie B from Nashville, Tennessee, because he's been catching so many balls from Mendoza. He's like 6'3", and just like he's light in terms. He's not a huge physique, but my gosh, like he has pace. He runs such good routes, and I think his ability to get open against star cornerbacks is like, for someone who is, again, he fits the bill of, he's kind of 2-star recruit. I was actually standing beside one of the great friends of his parents at the game, and they said to me this is the first time they've seen him play 3 or 4 times in high school. They've never seen him play for the Hoosiers before. So again, that's kind of the story that like maybe typifies where Indiana and Cignetti are going. And then probably one of the standouts on the defensive side, D'Angelo Pons. He's a Miami guy, like Mendoza. He's a Miami guy, so this is personal and it's local and it's returning home for him on Monday night. But again, he's like his ability to just jump receivers, cut the route, intercept the ball. He's gone up against like star players all year. He used to play against Jeremiah Smith from Ohio State in high school, and he gave up 50 pounds to him in the Big Ten championship game. But for maybe 1 or 2 plays that Jeremiah Smith's always going to make, he kind of he kept him in check, and I think probably like it's going to be a huge night for him. But they sometimes utilize him. And we're not saying he's not Charles Woodson, but they utilize him on offense sometimes as well, Pons. So you might see him popping up and catching the ball from Mendoza on a trick play. So they're the 2 guys, and they both, again, they epitomize everything about the philosophy of Cignetti, which is like identifying talent, high level, who are performing. It's not a talent. They're not a 4 or 5 star recruit, but they fit the system so neatly.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. I guess the final point on Indiana, And at the very end, I'm going to ask who you think is going to win the game. But we can come to that. We can leave people waiting for the big pick. But just explain to us why Fernando Mendoza is the presumptive heir to the number one overall pick. What has his performance been like this year in college football as somebody who has watched a lot more of it than I have?
Well, there's a number of reasons. I think it's but most importantly for a quarterback, like fundamentally sound. He does not get rattled by good pass rushes. He can take a hit. You know, the first play in the Big Ten championship game, Ohio State, it was late hit and no flag was thrown. His brother, Alberto, came on to replace him for one snap, and then he came back on. So the toughness thing is a huge part of the Cignetti offer, and that's kind of baked into the DNA of this team. But I think he can make so many throws. He's not only fundamentally sound, but his poise, anticipation, touch in the pocket. But he can also it's not, he's not going to move like a Lamar Jackson or a Mahomes out of the pocket. But if the space opens up, he'll go. And I think he's a very bright guy. He got into Yale. I think he got a sports scholarship and he got into Yale on his academic numbers as well. So just very grounded guy. He's going through an awful lot off the field because his mom has his mom has MS and it's advancing very quickly. So you will see his parents in the stadium, and his mom is in a wheelchair right now, and she was when he won the Heisman Trophy for standout player in the country and before Christmas as well. So but he seems to have so much poise, and I think he probably he's just such a kind of a willing disciple within the Cignetti scheme. But also his play has been elevated so much. He was a really good player at Cal last year. But again, this is the other thing about the linkage between this Cignetti mindset. The modern day with NIL and transfer portal, the number of guys who are on that team on the Indiana who are on the 22 side. So there's a huge maturity piece there. In addition to they've been in the trenches, they've dealt with massive adversity. And they just keep coming back, and I think that's and that's also a strong point for Miami as well. And but certainly the modern trend of the last 2 years with Ohio State and Michigan winning is that you have two teams that have maybe got a lot of senior players back, so their guys are at least 21, 22, and that's kind of like a modern day kind of blueprint for maybe how to do it.
That's very interesting, and I didn't know that about Mendoza, that he was a lot of in his personal life, because I was spoken a lot about in this podcast how I just feel like he's just such a burst of energy and he's so smiley, and I use this term endearingly. I feel like he's one of these kind of dork quarterbacks who does really good. He has it all in his head, and he's not going to get caught partying too late in Vegas, which is funny because that's probably where he's going. And you know what I mean? He's just that kind of guy, and I used to joke to the guys that I was praying he wouldn't get ruined by the New York Jets, but maybe wherever else he goes in the NFL, he can succeed. And I certainly hope he does. I mean, he's a guy I think is very you're endeared towards him when you watch him in press conferences. And I imagine you saw him live as well. Is he? You imagine there's a buzz when he's on the field. People feel endeared to watching how he plays on the field.
Yeah, and his arm is terrific, and maybe it's one of those underrated things because I think he's just very good across the board, and I think maybe this is not necessarily we're very early evaluating this draft class, but on paper, he has all the the attributes and virtues that you would want in a top 5 pick, or if not, he'd be going number 1 because the demand is such, and he has some of the intangibles that maybe the number 2 guy behind him doesn't necessarily have at this point.
Yeah, you say it's too early for draft evaluation, but for 24 to 32 teams, that's the level we're at now. So it's never too early for draft talk, even though it kind of already is too early for draft talk. But
yeah, no, the season is up. The season has 1 game to go, and we're but 4 days away or 3 days away from the end of the season. So absolutely, yeah, we're here first.
Let's talk about we're talking about Mendoza, of course, being the home quarterback. He's a Cuban American, a Miami boy coming back to Miami Gardens to have his chance at winning a championship. Let's talk about the home team, the team that plays most of its games in Hard Rock Stadium, that is the University of Miami. Interesting, so much controversy about their inclusion in the college football playoffs in the first place. Notre Dame fans are A lot of them felt like they should have been put in their place. I'm oversimplifying that a little bit, but that was sort of the way that that it was painted at the time. But you go back to the results. They had to go to Texas A&M in the first round of the playoffs for a very, very physical matchup. Got a 10-3 win. Really good defensive performance. Second game in the Cotton Bowl. Nice 24-14 victory over reigning champion Ohio State before getting past Ole Miss in a more sort of traditional shootout, 31-27 in the Fiesta Bowl. Interesting run to get here. You were mentioning Mario Cristobal earlier as head coach, but let's talk firstly about their quarterback, Carson Beck, somebody who's come down from Georgia to take this opportunity in Miami. I think it's fair to say that getting to this stage is maybe exceeding people's preseason expectations of him. But whatever's working there and what he's been doing in Miami, the later that they've worked, the better that it's worked.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think probably, from the advantage of sitting in Atlanta and kind of reading Georgia fans, their verdict on Carson Beck, I think there was a lot of, they tried to say that he was very enamored with the trappings of, effectively free agency and like the money that goes with NIL. And that was his, maybe a chief motivator for going to Miami. And something they continue to do. But I mean, if you look at his performances, especially as we've got to like really meaningful football this year, I think like he's been kind of up and down. He was spoken of as a future number one pick, that poison chalice about a year and a half ago. And I don't think his performances necessarily at Georgia lived up to that. But I mean, he's gone, the change has been very good for him. He's in a proven, scheme where they have great O-line play, probably like the second offensive line in the country after Indiana. So he's getting a lot of protection. He's probably having to scramble a little bit more than he would be used to, but that's, you're taking what the defense are going to give you there, because I think he's, as typified by the end of the Ole Miss game, that was he scrambled a couple of times, and ultimately the final scramble was that the game-winning touchdown he picked up. So I think I think he has a kind of an obvious ceiling, in terms of I think when I was talking about Mendoza, I was thinking kind of a little bit about Beck doesn't have a lot of those attributes, but he's still a very good quarterback, and I think he's done very well in the system. And playing with Miami, Cam Ward going out. So there's a definitely a kind of a succession path. I don't think it's quite like Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma from a couple of years back, when it comes to, those players going on. But I think it's he's in a good system that works for him. And I think for me, the challenge is, when it comes down to the crunch, can he link up with Malachi Tony, who's their star wide receiver, only in his first year, an outrageous talent and an absolutely brilliant blocker. But I think to get to the crunch in the fourth quarter, he's going to need to make throws that maybe he hasn't had to so far. And that for me is going to be the true test of him in this game. But I think he's shown that he can play clean and not make mistakes, which is absolutely a criticism of Beck in the past, and certainly when he was here at Georgia.
So call it for us then. What these are, you're outlining two very strong teams. Physical, offensive line is good, quarterback is good, coaches go from good trees, but each have their own instinct identities. It's going to be a great matchup, but what way do you see it going when it kicks off?
I would probably lean on that. They both have different paths to the final, as you discussed earlier, Shane. And the kind of Miami being disputed, but there's no disputing how they've played since they got into the playoffs. They've been in tighter games. That might be something that maybe stands to them. And I think they're if you look at someone like Reuben Bain on their defensive line, their offensive line, they have some serious talent there. I think the key thing for them is to be still there in the third quarter. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think Indiana is going to run away with it at all. And I think, in terms of the line play, that's what's going to keep Miami in it. The challenge becomes then in the fourth quarter. It's can Beck do what I just said, make those throws. Malachi Tony, can he get downfield and make some plays? And then the other thing is the running game. There's a little suspicion that Indiana haven't let teams run on them, and they've done very well. But I think they're going to come up against a good running back in this game, and that might be the key to the game. But no, you can see the way I'm leaning. I had too much trust in this Indiana team. Like, they're the best coach team in the country. They are, as I said, not laden with top recruits, but they just are a wonderful team. And the Hoosiers fans traveling down in their thousands. I think their time has come, and I think come, when they're out there on their own without Cignetti, come game time, that they can get over the line by the end of the night on Monday. So, and then we can talk about the significance of Indiana and where they sit, where this kind of result sits, because I think it's, I've heard people in the US talk about like Leicester City comparisons, or I don't think there is a comparison in US sport like some of the all-time upsets.
Yeah,
but it's like,
So this is the thing, like in all the preseason stuff. No, like obviously Indiana never graced. I mean, there were 2 seasons away from being a 2-win, being a 2-win thing.
I hate that term, the losingness. It's like we have the Division I school out of 125 that's lost the most games in the history of football. So it's like they've come from a long way down to be here. And I think probably what they're going to show is that this is not an aberration. This is who they are now. They're a juggernaut, and Cignetti will turn them into a powerhouse. Win or lose, I would say win or lose on Monday night. I hope for their sake and for the sake of the story that he stays there. I know he'll get plenty of offers maybe from the NFL, but I just don't think, I'm not sure he's going to be interested in that. He's built something like phenomenal with like his assistants, as I said, who've been with him for a long time, and long may it continue, because it's such a good story, and it's a privilege to watch it from a kind of a sideline perspective.
Yeah, I can't imagine the pitch from an NFL team who's just gone maybe 4 or 5 wins. Even let's say the Falcons, who I think are a decent head coaching opportunity in your neck of the woods, and say, hey, you've built this great program, and everybody's talking about it as one of the greatest things in history, and the turnaround and everything. Why don't you leave that and come manage in the NFL? I just can't see that being a strong enough pitch. And like you were saying, this is a magical thing. I guess briefly, I know this is a very complex subject, but like the way that we now look at this success in the new sort of money era, because between the transfer portal and NIL money, like a lot of people just expected that the richer teams will sort of get richer, that we'd constantly see championships going to Alabama or LSU or whoever, pick whoever the bad guy is in your head. But we've seen now, if Indiana win this for the 3rd year in a row, it's a Big Ten team, not an SEC team. No SEC teams are in the final. Obviously, Indiana, like you're saying, are a small team that we're accustomed to seeing empty stadiums, and now they're filling. Everyone's packing their cars and driving down to Georgia and Florida this time of year. I mean, how does this change the way that we view how college football has changed in the last few years?
Yeah, I think the democratization is very welcome. We've gone from a situation where, I was just thinking about this morning, it's like you had like last 15 years where it's Clemson wins twice, and Clemson were a bit of the Cinderella story for a while until it became a superpower. And then, those Alabama years with Saban where they win 6 times in like 11 years. And then, the usual suspect, LSU, and then there's this new powerhouse comes along, Kirby Smart in Georgia. And there's an element of like, well, it's all a bit samey, and it's very SEC driven. And, I'm not sure like how many fans around the country are, want to tune into all those things if it becomes a little bit stale and boring. But now you have, the players are getting their incentives, are getting paid to, up to a point. But some of them are getting paid really lucratively. And you would just have, have an infusion of coaches who are coming up from the junior ranks from Division II schools to get really good jobs because they're proven head coaches and they just win wherever they go. Case in point, Curt Cignetti.
Yeah.
So I think it's a wonderful thing, and I think it's made the game so much more interesting, and I think it's grown the game to a wider audience. And I do think, again, my sample size is not exactly huge, but like the number of people I know who are kind of traditional NFL fans who are kind of watching much more football, not necessarily picking a team, but just you see the deadlock of the SEC being broken, and then you see someone like Indiana come along, and you just think, well, this is a brilliant thing. And when you meet the fans, the whole thing about it, what is a Hoosier? A Hoosier is like, it's someone from Indiana, and the attributes are like, hard work, autarky, kindness, decency. And it's like, that's a great thing. That's what I saw and kind of experienced last Friday night. And it feels like something that has like is built to last. It's not just going to be a fairy tale and then it's going to go away. But the challenges will become, there will be another Indiana emerging in the next year or two, and there's a lot of talk as to who that will be. And Indiana has some has in Mark Cuban, like an absolute Shark Tank guru behind it, who he owns the Mavericks, the Dallas Mavericks in basketball. So they do have, it's not just a rags to riches story based on just good coaching. It's like they have set things up. And I think that's the change about the sport, is that the traditional blue bloods now have to put up with these upstarts who could become dominant players very quickly, and it makes it profoundly more interesting for the viewer, whether whether you're an NFL fan who has a team on Saturday or not.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, even like Georgia Tech, who is in your backyard, was in the top 25 this year, compared to where they were before they played in Dublin a couple of years ago. That's a story I've enjoyed following as much as I can. Didn't quite get it done in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which of course is the biggest, is the big one really. But I think you make some very good points. And look, well, I guess no matter what the result is, like the legacy of this Indiana season, I don't think, obviously it'd be nicer if they won the championship. They could say they're a championship winning team, but they're not. It's not. I don't think it would be smashed by Miami winning either, will it?
I don't think so. No, I think probably the mystique and aura maybe of going 16 and 0 and winning the national championship would be would take it into a different stratosphere altogether. But no, I don't think it would. I don't think anyone would be saying like little old Indiana couldn't do it. The moment was too big for them. And by the way, the Cignetti was asked after winning the Rose Bowl by an ESPN sideline reporter, was like, you managed the moment so well. And he said, well, why did you say that? Is that because our name is Indiana? And it was just like, I was watching the game with my wife, and she was like, he's bang on. Like, it's just like, like people are still kind of putting them down and underestimating them. And it's like, what you're seeing play out each week at the moment is just the perfect response to that. Because I believe they are absolutely the best team all around in the country. And as I said, I think they'll ultimately take care of business on Monday night.
Well, we're very much looking forward to it. Andrew, look, anybody who's listened through, I think, can clearly see that you know your stuff. For anybody who wants to see your work, where can they find it?
Yeah, I'm just an Irishman on football.com. And college football, rugby, soccer, Jennifer Capriati, tennis. That's the greatest comeback of all time, I think, the Capriati story. But we need to find the team equivalent of that, and I think you might have that by Monday night.
Very much so. Well, listen, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the game. I hope do you get like a watch party going? Is there something like when you're in the South?
Since you talked about the Cuban American angle, I'm all in on that, because Mario Cristobal is second generation Cuban American, and so like I think there's going to be a big party in Miami on big Latin American party on Monday night. I need to find out. I'm not going to fork out for the prices to get there, but what I could do to make amends.
Yeah, it sounds like great fun. I might head over myself if it wasn't if it wasn't on a different continent. Andrew, listen, thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and I hope you enjoyed the game.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks very much, Shane.